Welcome back to the Metropolitan Culture Corner, where this month I go behind the scenes with producer, sound engineer, recording studio owner, and musician Pau Romero. I met Pau in my professional capacity as a musician, and I've met a lot of producers, I've met a lot of studio owners, I've met a lot of sound engineers, and of course a lot of musicians, but there's not a lot of people like Pau. He really has a special gift for what he does, and as I've had the opportunity to witness him in action, I just couldn't resist the temptation to interview him. Before becoming a producer, Pau was a multi-instrumentalist who then trained as a sound engineer, and finally in 2018 he was able to make his dream of owning a professional studio a reality. And at the time he never imagined that his career would give him the opportunity to collaborate with all kinds of different artists from all walks of life. Everybody from global icons from the 80s like Take That, to Skrillex, to Nathy Peluso, to more underground bands like Flashy Ice Cream, Catalan artists like Xarim Aresté, and everybody in between. He's one of these rare individuals who is capable of taking pretty much any artist's vision and just making it that much better. It's one thing to have the gear, it's another thing to know how to use it. It's one thing to know how to play an instrument, it's another thing to know how to work with artists. And he really is just this fount of knowledge that brings together all these different disciplines, and it's just been fascinating to get to know him, to get to work with him, and so of course I wanted to interview him. In our world of disposable art, so to speak, where AI artists are topping the charts and where you can hear music, streaming platforms, millions of songs in 5 minutes if you choose, sometimes it's easy to forget that there are all these people behind the scenes who do incredible work, incredible creative work. They're not the names you're going to hear, they're not the faces you're going to see, but without them, none of this music would exist. Pau Romero is one of those people. His home in Barcelona is Beat Garden Studios, and we're going to talk all about that because I see he's just entered the waiting room. I'm going to let him in. Please give a warm welcome to multi-instrumentalist, producer, recording engineer, studio owner, Pau Romero on this month's edition of the Metropolitan Culture Corner. Thank you for being here with us. Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Well, welcome, Pau Romero, to the Metropolitan Culture Corner. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you so much for having me. The pleasure.
So I see your studio behind you, but before we start talking about what you're doing today, I wanted to ask you about the beginning. How did you get started as a musician? How did you get started as an engineer?
So first of all, I started playing piano when I was a little kid at the conservatory here, but it was very boring at the time because I was like 7, 8 years old and I was attending classes with a lot of people older than me, and I was this kind of kid that was all the time moving and all the time making noises, and the teacher getting out of her mind. And then at some point when I was 12, I remember that my dad had the guitar at home and I started playing guitar. Instantly I made the switch. I quit the conservatory and I started playing guitar. And then when I was 14, I joined my first band. It was a band of people quite older than me. They were like 30 years old at the time and I was the kid. And yeah, that was my starting. And then I started studying at Taller de Músics here in Barcelona, because at the time it was the only place that you could study modern music, jazz. You only could study jazz music at Taller de Músics or at L'Aula, and I chose Taller de Músics because I had friends that went there. That was the start of my journey as a musician. And then I was playing with a lot of bands and singers-songwriters, because in Barcelona in the early 2000s, when I was 18 years old, there was a big scene of singers-songwriters. There were a few clubs or bars that you could play at the time every night with live music. Sadly, this doesn't happen nowadays. And I was playing with a lot of them. That was a really good experience because I was playing almost every day with different singers-songwriters, with different styles. On that period of time, I learned so much how to interact with a singer-songwriter while you are playing, because it's different being a solo musician than interacting with someone. And I learned how the singer-songwriter structures their minds and structure the writing process. So I could understand, like, this singer-songwriter usually does this kind of chords, or this other singer does this kind of chords. So it was like a really helpful thing to me. It's a really good thing that has served me a lot during my producer career, because I can understand different mindsets and different approaches to music, because it's different for everyone. And then at some point when I was 20, 21, 22 years old, I started to record myself and the projects that I was working on. And I think that my first record, it came in 2003. So it's more than 20 years now. And I started recording at my parents' home, like everyone those days. I started in my old bedroom, just with a computer and just one microphone at the time. I had a few savings and I bought an old Mac G5 and a Mbox interface. And I remember the feeling arriving at home, having spent all my money, because at the time it was a lot of money, and thinking, oh God, I don't know how this works. So I have to figure out how to make this work. And I remember that feeling, being at my home saying like, okay, so it's a good investment. You have to make it work. Yeah, and that was my starting point at this journey. And then first I started with one room in my parents' home, and then I took the room next door that was empty, and I put some drywall and I tried to insulate a little bit. That room became my recording room. So I had my control room, that was my bedroom, and the recording room. You could hear all the noises of the neighbors when they were on the bathrooms, on the showers. So when I was recording electric guitars or something quite loud, it wasn't a problem. But when I had to record an acoustic guitar, like super soft, super intimate, I have a lot of recordings that are so many noises. And I developed a technique that I woke up around 2 o'clock in the morning, and I knew that I had from 2 o'clock in the morning until 6 when all the showers and all the life started in the building. So I had that period of 4 hours time to record with complete silence.
It sounds like a lot of the way that you've approached, at least the beginning of your career, was, okay, I have this, how am I going to make this work? I'm going to make it work somehow. So is that still a philosophy that serves you well today?
Yeah, for me, if I think from a retrospective in my life, I think that, I've always played with the cards that I have. And I always try to make it work with what was or what is in my hands. So as you know, having a recording studio or being a producer, especially if you are a producer that owns a recording studio, it's something really hard, really expensive, and you have to make it work however you can. Unless you are from a rich family or whatever, that's not my case. So in my whole life, it's been like, okay, I have this, I want to make it work. Once I make it work, what do I need to make the next step? So I need to invest on a bigger place, like the place that I'm these days. So what do I need? So I need a loan, whatever it is. It's just adjusting at the time with what you have in your hands. And I think that, at least in my case, but I think it's a good thing for everyone, it's a learning process that keeps you growing, and you grow as you learn. Mm-hmm. Because if I had this studio when I was not 20, 30 years old, probably I wasn't prepared at the time for being able to manage everything and to make the kind of records that I'm making these days and to deliver what the artists and the clients expect. For me, it has worked so much that every step has led me to the next step. It hasn't been a really big gap, like, okay, I'm starting on my bedroom and then suddenly I'm making Grammy records. No, everything has been like a steady growth.
I think that's the part that people don't always see. Like when you see a movie about a musician or a producer, they always start with the part where you're recording in your bedroom and then they show you winning the Grammy. They don't show the part in the bedroom, right? So,
Yeah, but this is what happened on every artistic career. It's like, obviously there's these people that they get lucky and they go from to. But 99.9% of people, it's like steady and consistent work. And for me, it's amazing because there's some point that you can lose perspective and not realize what you have achieved during the years so far. So for me, it's a really good exercise to see around me and say, wow, it's amazing. So let's keep going. I couldn't imagine 10 years ago that I had an SSL in front of me or an ELM 251 to record vocals. So this is great to remind ourselves that everything is like a steady journey. And when you look back, you can say, oh, it's been more than 20 years that I'm doing this. So we can consider quite success, no? That we're being able to do this for such a long period of time.
That's not easy, especially in the climate that we're in these days, right? You mentioned, that it's been this steady progression. So how did you get from recording in your bedroom, your parents' house? It sounds like they were supportive, which is cool, but it's still a huge step to go to the space that you're at now. So how did you end up in the studio?
So when I was at home, at the time I was working as a teacher, so I had to manage crazy schedules, like teaching kids 9 to 5 and then making records 7 to whatever time it was.
And you were teaching music?
At the time I was teaching at primary school. I was teaching everything like languages, mathematics, whatever, and music also. And then at some point I started to realize that, okay, it's cool to be at your home. It's cool to start, but if I want to work with bigger artists or whatever, it's great to be outside the home, outside the family house. So I moved to a studio here in Barcelona. It was a studio that had a basement and I rented the basement. And this was the first step, like, okay, let's move on to a more serious place. It wasn't ideal. It was something really crappy at the time, full of humidity, but at the time was good. And for me, I had for the first time the feeling of, okay, now this is my proper business and I can bring people here. I have to pay rent for the studio and manage all the bureaucratic things that everything involves. And it was a period of time that I was making quite a lot of records on that studio. But the last 2 years of being there, I felt that it was so small for me because I had at the time like 50 square meters in total, and I managed to build 3 rooms. So I had the control room, the live room, and a small room where I could put a guitar amplifier. So I managed to record live bands, and I learned how to record live bands in such a small space, no? And then at some point I felt that, okay, I need a change, so let's find options. So you have to imagine that at the time I was probably 27, 28 years old, and I started looking places and I found an industrial space in the city. It was amazing, but at the time I had no money, I had no savings, and I had to go to every bank in the city to see if they could lend me the money, get a mortgage, etc. And after nearly 2 years of let's speak with this guy of this bank, let's speak with the other guy of this bank, let's try to find money, blah, 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 blah. Suddenly when one bank said, okay, yes, let's try to make it work, the industrial space was sold. And for me it was like, oh, but at the time it was like, okay, it's not a problem. I'm going to stay here at my current place for 1 year, 2 years more. And then in 2 years, I will have more savings and I will start again the process of finding a new space and let's see what happens. But you never know how life works and how everything happens. I remember that this happened at the beginning of the week. That Sunday, I was on Facebook and I saw a friend of mine was recording in my actual studio. I didn't recognize the studio. So I messaged him, hey, where are you recording? And he said to me, oh, I'm recording in a studio that the owners, they want to retire. And one of them knows you and knows your work and wants to sell the business. And he wants to sell the business to someone like you because he doesn't want to go online and people sneak around the studio. And it was like, okay. He says, just call him. That was on Sunday. On Monday, I called him. On Tuesday, I was having lunch with him. And 20 minutes after we sat on the table to have lunch, we had an agreement.
Seriously? That's
seriously,
amazing.
that's amazing. He was an engineer. He was the head engineer of the biggest studio in Spain during the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. It was a studio called Gemma Studios. They had 3 studios in the city, and people like Sting, they came to Barcelona to record records. So it was super, super big at the time. So that guy was a traditional engineer, that he loved the process, that he loved the way of doing things in the right way. And he knew something that I did, and he loved that. And was like, no, I want to sell the studio to someone like you. I think that made everything a little bit easier.
But that just kind of goes to show that even if you're doing work on a laptop in your bedroom or in a basement with humidity or whatever, that just always do the best work possible because you don't know where it will take you.
Yeah, I remember once that I was recording with a drummer. He's a really good friend of mine. And he said something like, when you accept a project and when you're working on a project, you have to do it 100% or whatever. It doesn't matter the budget that is involved, because on the credits on the record, it doesn't say, oh, this drummer hasn't played really good because the budget was really low, no? So then your name is on the credits and your credits speaks for you. So yeah, this is something that for me, it's like every time that we are working, trying to make the best you can. And obviously there's times that you make mistakes and it's not a problem. You can always go back and redo the things or whatever it is. I can work in a production and be really happy with the production, and then the artists come to me and say, oh, it's really good, but I don't feel what I have to feel with this song. And it's like, okay, tell me why. Okay, you're right. So let's try and find a way that you can feel with the production that we're doing on your song, what you want to feel with your song. So we all sometimes make mistakes. And I think it's really good if you are able to come back and give a step back and start the process again. So
the reason why I said is because we know each other from music. I work in music. And this attitude that you have makes total sense to me, but it's not the attitude you always find in people in the entertainment industry. There's a lot of egos and stuff. So, I mean, it sounds like you learned a lot from playing with all these different musicians and people older than you when you were really young, and learned how musicians work. And I know you've taken master classes with really amazing producers and really amazing engineers. You've worked with all these different people, but this attitude of we just got to serve the project, approaching all these different personalities different ways, is that something that comes from just your own experience, or is this something that you learned from a mentor or someone that you've seen working that you thought, that's how I want to work?
Comes from therapy.
Good answer.
Comes from therapy. I think that the best investment that someone that works in the music industry, especially in recording studios and production, it's going to therapies once a week or once every 2 weeks. So for me, it's something that it's non-negotiable. It helps a lot to manage situations and to put your ego in the right place. Obviously, everyone that works in this business has this kind of artist ego, okay? Because if not, we were doing something else.
Right.
But there are two things that I always remind to myself. One is I'm lucky enough to do this every day of my life. So when I was 15 years old, the thing that I loved the most was playing basketball, playing guitar, and playing with computers. So I'm doing 2 of 3, so it's quite good. And the reason that you're able to work with on this industry for a long period of time, it's because the artists, they trust you. And for they to trust you, you have to have your ego really controlled. So you have to be really grateful to the artist because they want to work with you. Obviously, there are some points that you can agree or not agree or whatever it is. But if you put your ego aside and you try to serve the artist, and then the most important thing for me is if you try to serve the songs, it's a really easy way to make things happen in a really easy and not stressful way, and not with battles of egos or this kind of things that I try to avoid. So for me, it's like having those two considerations. We're very lucky to do this every day. And we're very lucky that the artists, they trust on my work, on my criteria, whatever it is. And we're here for serving the song. And it doesn't matter if the idea is yours, it's mine, or it's from the assistant that comes to the room and brings the tea. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But I think that sadly, it's an industry that this kind of work ethic is not always like this. And I know from different artists that they have really bad experiences working with people. It hurts me a little bit because it's like, oh, but it hasn't to be like this. No, it's really fun what we are doing, and it's really beautiful. And we are not in the supermarket putting cards or working in an office. We are doing this, so we have to be really conscious of the privilege that we have.
See, this is why I like doing these interviews, because I like to show people, like, this is an inspiring thing. So, ole tu, yeah. I'm just happy to get to interview you because there are so many people who are young kids trying to get into making music these days, and who I think this will be really good for them to hear, you know? So that's one aspect that's just so important when you're doing creative work, is to have this kind of attitude, right? To serve the work, to not have an ego. But then also there's another side of it, which is this both creative and technical side. You mentioned music and computers and stuff. So aside from the way that you approach a project personally as a human, you also have to know how to use all this stuff. Like, you have this incredible collection of modern and vintage gear, instruments, amplifiers, microphones, pedals, preamps, a lot of stuff. And some of these microphones cost more than like a car. So just on the technical side of things, how have you been able to learn how to use all this stuff, use it well, apply it well to the work? Because that's a whole nother thing. You could have the best attitude in the world, but if you don't know how to use the tools that you have available, you can't necessarily realize the visions. Because I've been in many studios and I've never seen like the amount of stuff that you have and someone that knows how to use it. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. Really. When I started, I was producing in my parents' apartment. I was producing a record, and the artist wanted to go to mix to a studio. I say, okay, yes, let's go there, because for me it was a good experience to learn from one really good professional. And the first day that I went to that studio, it was a mixing studio with a lot of outboard gear and everything. Like, for me, it was like entering a Disneyland. So for me, it was like, wow. I remember having my hard drive with the sessions, and the engineer opened the sessions. He looked at me and said, do you know how everything works? And I have to say that I have this small amount of bravery or irresponsibility sometimes that I say, yes, I know how everything works. And he was really kind to me, and he gave me the keys of the studio, and he said to me, okay, this month I have a lot of work outside the studio doing online recording, on-site recordings and recording orchestras and big bands. In 1 month, I come and let's see what you've done.
Oh, good.
He left me along with all the gear. I remember just, okay, let's see how it works if I run the snare through this compressor. Okay, and now through the other one. And I spent 1 month that I was sleeping there. So I remember going home to take a shower, then going back to the studio. And he was really kind to me, because he used to come when he finished his work and said to me, okay, what you've done today? And I played the mix. And I remember him telling me, okay, be careful with the low end because they sound really good. The low end is amazing, but then it cannot translate everywhere to other systems, or this vocal is so high, there's too much reverb in here. And for me, that was a really, really, really big experience, and I'm really, really grateful. And then I always had a lot of curiosity on how everything works, like how a radio cassette, a tape cassette works, how a microphone works. And I spent a lot, like a random amount of hours reading and trying stuff and reading more. And then with internet and everything, but it was a little bit later that when I started watching all the possible videos that you can, trying all the possible things that you can learn from here and from there. I have a lot of insecurities while I'm working. And for me, every day, it's like trying to make everything a little bit better and trying new things to do. It's like, let's set the bar here, but the next record, we're going to set the bar here. And for me, one really good thing that I think that helped me a lot, it's trying to match my work and my outcome with professionals, with Americans and professionals from the UK, to have the UK and the America records like a reference. So we know that this here in the city, it's not the same that in Nashville or whatever it is, but it's just an excuse not to make the work as good as we can, no? So let's try to reach that level, and then let's try to reach a little bit more. But for me, it's keep going and keep digging. It's like when you have to make a sculpture, at the very beginning, it's just a piece of whatever it is, no? So you have to be sculpting, and then suddenly everything comes in place, and then you have to keep sculpting a little bit more. It's like playing an instrument. From 0 to 10, you can grow really fast, but 10 to 12, it's really hard. Every time it's harder, but every time it's more fun because you know more and you know how to achieve. And then I have attended to a few seminars with Greg Wells and other guys. It's a thing that I recommend to everyone to do because it opens your vision so much, and you realize that everyone is on the same spot as you are. In different ranges and different leagues, but everyone has the same insecurities that you have, the same feelings that you have. And I remember being with Greg Wells, and he said something to us. He said, do you know this record? And everyone in the room was like, no. And this record? No. And this record? No. And he said a lot of records. And he said to me, okay, don't worry, because everyone knows me for 3 records. The One Republic record, the Greatest Showman record, and the Mika record. And it was like, okay, this is something that happens to everyone that was in the room. So we have 1 record, 2 records, but we have a lot of work that no one knows about. But your feeling is that people doesn't know my work. But this feeling that you have, and you think that you are not at the same level that this guy, but he on his own league, on the superstar level, he has the same insecurity that you have.
Because as you said, everyone thinks, oh my God, why is it so difficult? And it's difficult for everyone, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting hearing you talk about how you learned to use all your gear and stuff, because I think people understand the idea of if you're passionate about playing guitar, you play more and you get better. But I think not a lot of people stop to think about the technical side of music as this other art form, or of theater, or of movie making, or of whatever. Like the technical side of it is as artistic as the musical side of it. You're the filter that everything goes through. So just hearing you be super excited about learning how all these things work, I think that's really fun. It seems like the best way to get good at something is to just love it a lot.
Just love it a lot, and keep going. But I have to say that this is not for everyone, because the amount of frustration that you have to be able to deal with when you are not reaching what is in your mind. I think that this is something that studying music since I was a kid, playing basketball, I think that this is a thing that can help people a lot. I remember throwing free throws and making 1 of every 4. I was like, no, I have to make 3 or 4 or 4 or 4. So if you cannot deal with the frustration, okay, if I'm not able to do it right now, I'm gonna leave. No. You cannot do it right now. Okay, just keep going, keep trying. When you learn to play 3 chords, you can play almost all the songs in the world. But when you're trying to get specific on something, like, okay, you're trying to play this kind of scale or whatever, it's just a scale that you have to learn. And the outcome that you will receive from this, it's less than playing 3 chords, because with 3 chords, you can play tons of songs. But if you cannot manage the amount of frustration that you can feel when you're trying to do something, and what you receive in return, it's so little, I think that this is when most people fail. One really good thing that Greg Wells told us, that I think that this is the thing that impacted me the most, was the difference between me and the difference between me and all the people that went to LA in the 90s is that me and 1 friend of mine are the only 2 that we never abandoned.
Don't give
And it
up.
was like, wow. For me, that paid the whole seminar, honestly. Just that sentence was like, okay, I'm gonna write on every wall in the studio or on my mind, because for me this is a thing.
Thank you so much, Pau, for taking the time to talk with me here on the Metropolitan Culture Corner. As many of you know, I'm a musician. I've been working with Pau for the past 3 months on a very complicated album project, and he has just been a source of wisdom and knowledge and zen and fun, and yeah, just really couldn't recommend him highly enough as a professional and as a human. So that's why I wanted to interview him, because this monthly interview series, the Metropolitan Culture Corner, was started precisely for that reason, to showcase the incredible creative people that we've got in this beautiful city of ours, Barcelona, and people like Pau who are behind the scenes, right? They're in the studio, they're not on stage. They're the people who are just as important as anybody else in the process of creating art, but you maybe never see them or never hear their names. In this particular case especially, it's such a pleasure to be able to shine the light a bit on the work that Pau Romero does. So for anyone out there who's working on an artistic career, who's working on any career at all, just take Pau as an example of what one can achieve if you just don't give up, if you remind yourself to enjoy the process and to continue to follow a path that you're passionate about. I know it sounds cheesy, but we've just seen living proof of how cool it can be if you just do it. And as Pau said, play with the cards that you got in your hands. Right, yes. So thank you so much, as always, to all of you who tune in once a month to witness these incredible conversations that I get to have with these fascinating creative individuals. I will see you next month, same time, same channel on the Metropolitan Culture Corner. You can find us on YouTube, on SoundCloud in the form of a convenient podcast, and of course on the Barcelona Metropolitan official website.